Tech by Tips.
Hello and welcome to another Tech by Tips video. First of all, I want to thank two donors to the channel, and these people are John Rowe and Richard Van Kampen. Thank you very much for your donation to the channel. They're very appreciated. Thank you very much for keeping us motivated here to continue creating good quality content videos for you. You are rock stars. Thank you. Alright, and on today's topic, first of all, I want to continue on the line. I've seen a very concerning trend, especially in Europe, where privacy is basically thrown out the window. I saw news recently about the European Union wanting to scan every message sent in Europe, and this is very concerning. Everyone should have a right to privacy, and this is not good. So today's video is going to be another thing kind of addressing this, giving you another way to communicate securely without being exposed to a greedy third party, like a big company like Microsoft or Google or maybe even Discord. You don't know what they do with your information, especially when the government tells them, give me all your information, right? So we're going to be discussing how you can host your own equivalent to like a Slack or Discord, so you can communicate freely with anyone you want, and you host your data, you maintain that data is private and nobody can get access to that. So that's what we're going to be covering, and in order to do that, we're going to be using an open source application named Mattermost. You can find that on github.com/Mattermost/Mattermost, and basically this is a open source platform for secure collaboration and across the entire software development cycle. This is mainly like a clone sort of Slack, so it's geared towards teams of people that are working on companies and stuff, but you can definitely use this for personal use for yourself if you want privacy. And it's open source, so there's a free version that you can use, and it works pretty nicely. It has all the nice features that you need. It is written in Go and React, and it runs in a single Linux binary, and it uses PostgreSQL as a database in the backend. And as you can see, it looks very, very similar to Slack. So if you've ever used Slack, you're gonna feel like at home with this application. And basically, it's very easy to set up. You can click here where it says deploy Mattermost on premises, and it's gonna take you to this URL here. You have a bunch of options to do that. You can just install it on Ubuntu, you have a tarball, you can do it in Red Hat, Kubernetes, Omnibus, but in my case, as usual, we're going to be using Docker for that. We're going to be deploying this in Synology NAS, so we're going to be using this option. So you click on install instructions, and it's going to take you another website that has a bunch of details, but this is kind of complicated. I've dumbed it down to a way that is very easy for you to get working. You just have to come here if you experience any problems. So I'm going to use my own way of doing this, since I've already digested this information and I've made it easy to set up. So let's get to doing that. The first thing that we need to do here is in our NAS, we're going to create a folder structure as usual to run our container and to store our data. So if for some reason we need to restart that container, we don't lose the configurations and the data and all of that. So the way we have it set up, we have a containers folder inside Docker and a projects folder inside Docker. In projects, I'm going to create a folder for Mattermost, and this is where our Docker Compose file is going to reside. And inside the containers Mattermost, we need to create a few folders. We need to create the client folder, doesn't have anything right now. Config doesn't have anything. Data doesn't have anything. Database doesn't have anything. Indexes doesn't have anything. Logs doesn't have anything, and plugins doesn't have anything. So as you can see, it's brand new, just the folders, nothing inside. But this is the structure that you need to create inside the containers Mattermost. And that's all that we need when it comes to folders. All our data is going to reside here, and our Docker Compose file is going to reside here. So now that we have the folder structure, we can go into the container manager, into our projects, and we can create a new project for Mattermost. And then we can pick that path in the Docker projects that we set for the Docker Compose file. And we're going to create a Docker Compose file. I already have my Docker Compose file, so I'm going to copy that in here. And then we're going to look at it in a bigger screen. So next, don't start, done. And now we can see it here in the YAML in a bigger screen. So what are we going to be doing here? All right, we need to define services. And we have two services. One of them is a database backend for Mattermost, and the other one is the actual application server for Mattermost. In here, we're going to be using PostgreSQL as the image for the database, and it's going to be version 17. We're going to name that container Mattermost-db, and we're going to put a host name of Mattermost-db so that we can do the connectivity between the two containers easy. Then here we're going to implement a health check to make sure that the container loads properly and everything is good, and we're going to rely on that for our application server. And then in here, we're going to mount one folder in the NAS that is going to be in the container on the right side. So the separator is this column here. So anything on the left of that is in the NAS. So that's the volume that we created. So volume docker containers Mattermost and then the DB folder. And that's going to be inside the container in this path, varlib PostgreSQL data. So all of our database stuff is going to be saved in our NAS in the database folder. That's the important thing here. So if we restart the container, we don't lose our data. The data is in the NAS. And again, we're going to set up some environment variables for the database container. And that's going to be the time zone. In my case, it's America, New York. You put the one that is respective for your case. We want this container to run as the user 1026 and 100, which is the first administrator account that you create when you set up your NAS, because I have given that user read and write permissions to all of these folders. So then the container is going to run as that user and is going to be able to write and read from these folders. And then we need to set the database name for Postgres. It's going to be Mattermost. The user that is going to be using in the case of the video is going to be Mattermost user. You can change this to whatever you want. And the password for that also is going to be Mattermost PW, but you can change that to whatever you want. And then we're going to say we're going to restart this container unless we manually go and stop it. So that will give us a database container for our application. Now we need to use that container in the application server. So we're going to be using the latest version of the Mattermost Team Edition image. We're going to name this Mattermost because this is the actual application server. And the host name for this is going to be Mattermost. And in here, we're going to specify that this container has to run as that same user that I specified up here. But we're going to be using the user definition instead of the process use ID and group ID. So the user ID is this one and the group ID is that one. And then we're going to map the rest of the folders that we created in the NAS so that this container can read and write to those. So for the Mattermost config, it's going to be the config folder in here. Then for the data, we're going to use the data folder in here. For logs, we're going to put it in the logs. For plugins in plugins. And then the client plugins is going to be to the client. And the bleed indexes is going to be in the indexes. So we're passing all of these folders to the container so that it stores all of its information in the NAS. And we don't lose it in case we need to restart the container. Again, the environment variables, we're going to put our time zone. In my case, this is America, New York. And we're going to be using Postgres as the driver for the database. And as usual, we need to specify a data source for this. So this is going to be Postgres as the protocol that is going to use. And then Mattermost user, which is the user that we specified for the database. And then the password that we specified here for the password. So make sure that this also matches that, right? So if the user has to be the same as this, and the password has to be the same as this. And then Mattermost DB, because that's the host name that we gave to this container here. So it is going to be able to connect to this container. And then port 5432, because that's the port to connect to the database in Postgres. And then this is part of the configuration so that we can connect to the right data source. And then in here for the indexes, we're going to put the default values that they specify, which is Mattermost/bleed indexes. And then in here for the service settings site URL, you need to update this. In my case, since I'm running this on my lab in my domain that I have, this is a free domain that you can get. There's a bunch of different services online you can use to get this, right? So I have jlpc ns01.us, and inside that I put a host, which is chat. So chat.jlpc.ns01.us, and then the port that I'm going to be using to expose this application is 8080, because I'm already using 443 and 80 for other things. So I need to use another not normal port. But if you don't have that problem, you can just get rid of this and use the 443, which is HTTPS. Now, we need to expose several ports. The 8065 in the container, let me make a note here. So this is in the NAS and this is in the container. And also that's the same case for here. All right. So then 8065 is for the web user interface, and I'm going to expose it in my NAS in 8401. Then for the web calls, so that's like phone calls that you can do in the application, it uses 8443, UDP, and TCP. So I'm specifying 8443 here, and I'm going to expose that in the NAS on 8443. So basically my NAS is going to be listening on 8401 and 8443, and it's going to pass those connections to the container in 8065 and 8443. And then again, we restart the container unless we manually stop it, and then we say that we depend on the database being up. So when we get the service started, then it's gonna work fine. So that's all that we need here in a Docker Compose file. We have mapped the appropriate users so that we can write to the folders. We have mapped the different volumes that we need, and we have exposed the ports as is needed. Now, we can save this, and then we can build this project. In my case, I've already downloaded the images, so that's going to be pretty fast. It's just going to build it up, and we'll see that here with an exit code 0 and a notification here. So that means that when I clear this and I go here into my containers, I already have my containers. If I go into the database and I go into the logs, you see that it did its thing and it's listening for connections in the database, so everything's good here. And if we go into the Mattermost server, into the logs, then we see that it's setting itself up. So we need to give it time, because it needs to create all the different files in the database here. So you see that it's created a bunch of stuff. It also has the configuration here. So it's setting a lot of stuff up. We need to give it time to complete the creation of the folders and the files that it needs. So just keep refreshing here until you see that it goes like 2 or 3 more lines after the emojis config database. I believe that was the case. So let's just wait a little bit and come back when that is done so we can actually see what is the actual value that we should get. Alright, it completed, and it was actually a lot more lines, so I got about 500 lines, and then we see this thing that says server listening on 8065, no license provided, remote cluster services are disabled. So yeah, that's one thing. If you're using the free version, not the enterprise one, the clustering services are not enabled, but you don't really need that, honestly. So now the application is running, even though we saw that weird orange thing on the top. So now we should be able to access this application. Now, if we go to another tab and we put the IP of the NAS and we put the port 8401, which is the port that we said here that we're going to be exposing the application on, we should be able to get a reply here from the application. And it says, you know, we're good to set it up and all that. But obviously, we want this application to be accessible from outside our home. So I'm not going to do that yet in here. We need to do something for this to work on a URL. So let's get that set up. Alright, so we go back to the NAS, we go to the control panel, we go into login portal, and in here we go to advanced. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to click on reverse proxy. I've already configured this, but I'm going to show it to you so you can see what you have to do. So by default, you would not have anything here, so you just click on the create button, and then it'll give you something like this. And in there, you're going to put the name of the application that you're going to be exposing. So in my case, it's Mattermost. And I'm going to be listening on port that is secure. So I'm going to select HTTPS as the protocol. And then in here, we're going to put the subdomain that we specified for this application. So in my case, my subdomain is jlpc.ns01.us, but the host for it is chat. So I have chat.jlpc.ns01.us, and I said that I'm going to be exposing this on port 8080. So that's what I'm going to be putting here. Even though the container is listening on 8401, the NAS is listening on 8080 for the web user interface and then redirecting that to the container on 8401. Then you enable HSTS here, and then in here you have to say where inside the NAS you want to redirect. So we're going to select HTTP because we saw that the application is not using HTTPS, and it's going to be localhost, so that's going to be redirected within the NAS, but it's going to be on port 8401. So here's where we specify the port that the container is listening on. Additionally, we're going to go here onto the custom headers. You should not have this, so you're going to click on create and then WebSocket, and that's going to give you this. And that's all that you need here. You don't need to do anything in advanced settings. So with that, you should be able to just save it, and then you should have this. Now, another thing that we have to do here is we need to make sure that we enable the HTTP compression and all that. So we can go back into the network section here, and then we're going to go here in where it says connectivity, and we're going to make sure that enable HTTP/2 is checked, because that speeds up the web page loading when using the encrypted connection, so HTTPS. So we want to have that set up in there. And another thing that we want to do is in security, we're going to go into the advanced tab, and we want to make sure that we have the compression enabled. So check enable HTTP compression, because that saves bandwidth and speeds up the transfer when you're using HTTPS. So that's another thing that we want to do here. So with that, now the NAS should be redirecting all the stuff that it gets on port 8080, which is the web user interface, into the container. But we have a problem. We need to expose the NAS. So we need to go into our router and we need to do port forwarding. That varies depending on the type of router that you have, right? So I'm not going to try to be exhaustive here. You have to look that up yourself. But it should look something like this. In my case, I have a FiOS router. And in my port forwarding rules, I have a rule that allows to send that information to my NAS on that specific IP. And I'm going to forward anything that comes on port 8080 and 8443 to my NAS. And I'm going to be forwarding anything TCP or UDP. So anything that comes on TCP 8080 or UDP 8080 or TCP 8443 or UDP 8443, the router is going to say, I'm not going to deal with this. Let me give it to the NAS, and then the NAS is going to handle it. So once we do this, then the communication from the public internet comes into the NAS through the port forwarding rule. And then with the rules here for the reverse proxy, then it's going to say, okay, anything that I get on 8080, I'm going to forward it to the container that is running in my NAS. And that's how we get the application exposed. And the other thing that we need to do is, obviously, we're going to get a non-secure message if we try to run this. So let me go into the domain that I specified. So in my case, that's chat.jlpc.ns1.us, and then on port 8080, because like I said, I need to use another different port. And if you come up here, this is where you create your account and everything, but you have this ugly thing that says not secure. Even though we're using HTTPS, the connection is not secure. And if we go into the certificate details, it's because we're using the default Synology certificate. So we need to solve this, and we can do this very easily with Let's Encrypt. Let's Encrypt can get us a valid SSL certificate that we can use for our application. So I'm going to go back into my NAS, and I'm going to go here into the security and control panel, and then I'm going to go into certificate. And as you can see, I only have one certificate, which is the Synology. That's why that's what you see here. If you go into the certificate, you see Synology Inc., and then that's it. If we go here, that's the only certificate that we have, Synology Inc. And if we click here and select it, and then we go on settings, we see that our application Mattermost is using that certificate because I don't have any other certificate. So we need to request a certificate from Let's Encrypt. We can do this very easily. We click on add here, then we say add a new certificate, and then we need to say what it is for. So that's for Mattermost, and we need to get a certificate from Let's Encrypt. We say next, and then we have to put the domain here for our application. So I'm going to get my URL that I specified here, and I'm going to put it in here. And you have to put your email also. So I'm going to put my email there because you get notifications when the certificate is about to expire and all that. So then I have all of this here, and then I can say done. When I say done, this is going to start a process where the NAS is going to say to Let's Encrypt, hey, I need a certificate for this domain here. In order for that, I need you to give it to me. So you have to place a request. Let's Encrypt says, okay, let me make sure that you are who you say you are. And then it sends a communication to our URL that our NAS is going to intercept. And then when it gets that confirmation, okay, I am here, I'm listening for you, I know that you are trying to validate that I am who I say I am, here's my information. And then Let's Encrypt says, okay, I know that this belongs to you, so I'm going to actually issue a certificate for you. And that's what we get here. So now if you see, we got a certificate for chat.jlpc.ns01.us. And that's issued by R12, one of the Let's Encrypt servers. And this is valid. So now we have that certificate here for us. So that's great. That means that we can then go into select this, click on settings, and then in here where we have the URL for Mattermost, we can say, okay, don't use the Synology certificate, use the actual certificate that I just got from Let's Encrypt, and we say okay. And then it says, you know, it has to restart everything. So are you sure you want to proceed? I say yes. And then now whenever we run this application, it should be using that Let's Encrypt certificate, which is valid for our application. So this should go away. Probably is cached. Yeah, so I need to open this same URL but in a new window that is private, so that then it doesn't cache that. And here we go. As we can see now, we don't have the warning. It says that the connection is secure. If I click here, the certificate is valid. As we can see, this is from Let's Encrypt, and it is for the domain that I requested. So now we are secure. Our communication is encrypted properly and it can be trusted. So now what that you get here, we need to configure the application. So that's pretty straightforward. The first thing that we're going to do here is, in my case, I am going to be using the web user interface for this application. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say view in the browser, because there are also applications for iOS and Android. So if you want to use your phone to connect to the server, you can do that too. But for the sake of the video, I'm going to be doing it in the browser. So view in the browser, and then it says you need to create your account. So I'm going to create my account with an email here. And then for the sake of the video, my password is just going to be password. This is going to be deleted after I record the video, so no worries about that. And then create the account. And then what's the name of your organization? So I'm going to say this is Tech by Tips, and I'm going to continue. You can integrate with other services. Like I said, this is designed primarily for companies and specifically for like software development teams and engineers. So if you use, for example, GitHub, you can connect GitHub or GitLab or Jira or Zoom for your calls and all that. ServiceNow if you need it. I'm not going to connect anything right now, so I'm just going to leave nothing checked, and I'm going to continue. And then in here, we have this link that we can copy to invite somebody else into our server. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to open another window that I'm going to use later to create another user and show you how it behaves when you have two people communicating in the server. So for now, let's continue here. So finish the setup. It's launching the workspace, and here we go. We have Mattermost, which is a user interface that is very, very similar to Slack. And we're in the actual use of the application. So we can manage our notifications here and allow it. And then in here, we can make changes to things here. So the team settings, you can make changes here. So this is my YouTube channel team, for example. And then I can change the logo here to the logo of Tech by Tips and save this. You can also tweak the access in here, but I'm not going to do that for the sake of the video. I just wanted to show this. And you have your channels here, and you have direct messages. Currently, I don't have any other user, so I cannot message anybody else except for the system bot and the calls bot. So now, another thing that I want to do is, if we click here on top, we have the system console. If we open this in another tab, this is where we administer our system. So you have information here about the license you can get, how to make changes to the workspace, statistics about the server, the logs and all that. Here you can see the users, but you cannot create users directly here. So how do I add another user that then I can use to test that there's communication and all of that? You can see more stuff here. Another thing is that I think is important here. The SMTP option is for your server to send emails. So for example, when someone creates an account or they need they need to do a password reset because they forgot their password or something, then you need to set up an SMTP server here to send those emails from here. It could be anything. It could even be like a Gmail account. You can put it here, but it's just going to show us coming from that Gmail account. Or if you have a SMTP server, you can put your details here and then send your emails through that. That's the other thing that is important that I think it's good to highlight here. You have other options like enabling AI agents. There's also bot accounts that you can set up in here. You can integrate with a bunch of other tools and stuff. But yeah, this is basically the system console. Now, if I want to add someone to my server, how do I do that? Because I cannot create an account for them. So that's actually pretty straightforward. Let me move this to the left here, and we're going to leave the other one here. and we're going to be looking for a link that we need to invite someone to the server. So there are two ways that you can do that. You can click here where it says invite others to the workspace, and then you can copy the invite link here. Or you can click on the team here and then say invite people, and that's going to give you the same thing. You can copy that link and then you can put that link here. All right, so we copy that in here, and then that's going to trigger a new window for another identity that is going to join the server. And since we're using a sign up link that is an invitation, it's going to basically take us back to that page where we can select how we want to access, so view in browser, and then in here we have to provide information to create our account. So in my case, I'm going to say I'm going to use another account, so Gmail, and then I'm going to use iOS, actually Jorge2 is another user, and then password again for this, and I create another account. So now when I log into the server, I basically have two users in my platform. So if I want to direct message myself, I can look for myself. You see I have Jorge and Jorge2, so I'm going to select Jorge and I'm going to say go, and now I can do a direct message to myself here. So hi Jorge1, how are you? And then we see I got in my other account a notification from Jorge2 saying hi Jorge1, how are you? And I can reply, I am doing well, how about you? And you can see the communication flows without any issues. This is great. Immediately from the get-go we can communicate with text with people, and also we have the amazing opportunity to share links, and we can even attach files. For example, let me put the logo for my channel here, and boom, I send it, and here we go. I can send images and documents from one user to the other. And another thing that I love about this application is I can also do calls, and I can do screen sharing and all of that, just like you can do in Slack or Microsoft Teams or any other, like Zoom or any other of those things. So let's say I want to call myself, so I can, in my communication here, I can say start a call, and then it says calls is currently not enabled. So I need to go and enable this in the system. So let's go into my administrator account and go into the system console, and we need to make sure that that is enabled in here. Alright, so in the system console, you scroll down to this section here that says plugins, and then you click on calls. And then it says the plugin is enabled, but since we're in test mode, only administrators can start calls in channels. So in order for you to allow other people to start a call, then you need to turn the test mode off and save this. And then another user that is not an administrator can start a call. So now, let me refresh to make sure that everything is set up properly. And then we can try again to initiate a call. And there we go. Now, allow the microphone use and all that. And then, I got a weird blip there where for some reason the call dropped. But I started the call again. As you can see, my user is in the call. And this other user got notified, hey, there's a call going on. Join the call. So now this other user is going to be joining the call. And as you can see, there's an echo because I'm talking to myself. But everything works. The audio looks fine. You probably could not understand what I was saying because the echo and all that. But yeah, the audio was working fine. I could communicate from one user to the other using direct voice call. And all of this is encrypted because all of this is in an HTTPS connection in a server that we manage. And nobody can snoop in on our calls or our screen sharing or text messages and the pictures and files that we send to each other. So this is great not only for a small business, because this is like the main use, a small business, but if you have a group of friends and you're gaming and you want to have your own server to communicate and you don't want Discord to snoop on your conversations, for example, you can use this. Or maybe you're building your own server for gaming or something like that, your own game, and you want to have channels where you have documentation and all that, and you want to track like the changes to the code and all that. This is great for that too. Or if you just want to make sure that you have privacy and you don't have anybody snooping on your communications, and you don't want a government to go to a company and tell them, I want to see everything that this person has sent or talked about, or the files that they have shared, or any of that, you can do that because you own this, you manage this. You allow the people that you want to join your server and to use it and communicate with you. So that is the purpose of this video. Learn to host your own things, because authoritarianism is growing all over the world and the governments are in it. They want to be able to snoop in on you, to violate your privacy, which is a human right. I hope you liked this video. If you did, hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you have not done so. A lot of people that watch my videos are not subscribed to the channel, and that's important. That helps us grow. Also, hit the bell so you don't miss any notification whenever a video is uploaded. And also, remember, a lot of my videos are based on requests from people. This one is not. This was something that I wanted to put out myself, but I have a whole queue of things that people have requested, and as long as, it's a free software, or if I can somehow get support from the requester to pay maybe for a service, I'll work on that. So there's a queue. I prioritize people that donate to the channel. That's important. So if you place a request and it's still in the queue and you haven't seen it, know that if you're not a donor, I'm not going to prioritize your request. It's just going to be in the queue. But if you donate, it's going to be moved to the top of the queue as far as I can. Also, notice that you should have not received an ad on my video. That's on purpose, because I'm not monetizing the channel. So that's why you don't get any ads, or you should have not get any ads. This is because I don't want to bombard people with videos, like ads on my videos. But that also means that if you like my content, I'm getting zero money from the effort that I put into creating these videos. So that's why I also shout out to the donors to the channel, because they help me focus on the channel and they support me. So if you want to support me, there's a link in the description below for PayPal. There's also a Bitcoin wallet address where you can donate using Bitcoin if you prefer. So I highly appreciate all the donations to the channel. I shout out to everyone that donates to the channel. So thank you very much. That's going to be it for this one. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.